Have you ever wondered what becomes of promises after death? What happens to the vows whispered at an altar when they are broken, abandoned, or forgotten? Imagine walking into a place where silence weighs heavier than screams, where sorrow is not shouted but breathed into the soul. This is not the fire of hell, nor the peace of heaven, but a place between justice and mercy. And in that place, voices rise, not of strangers or criminals, but of parents, spouses, even faithful Catholics who once carried love in their hearts. What they reveal is so haunting, so unexpected, it forces us to ask, what if love itself echoes into eternity? Purgatory does not rage, it weeps. Saint Fina once wrote of hearing cries that were not caught by the ear but pressed directly into the soul. Whispers from a place where regret burns more than flames, where pain comes not from hatred but from memory. And among those voices were not tyrants or murderers, but ordinary people, mothers, fathers, believers. They did not scream, they unveiled. And what they unveiled about the sacred bond of marriage was so piercing that Fina recorded it in her diary with trembling awe. For from the other side, divorce is seen in a way we can scarcely imagine here. These voices carried messages, warnings, pleas that challenge everything we think we know about love, sacrifice, and eternity. And perhaps your simple prayer whispered today could be the very help they are still waiting for. Fina herself was not a theologian. She was no mystic chasing visions. She was a humble Polish nun, writing quietly within the walls of her convent. Yet through her, God opened a window into the invisible. She was shown not only the radiance of divine mercy, but also the sorrow of souls who had refused it. Mercy, she realized, does not always arrive with comfort. Sometimes it comes wrapped in confrontation. What the souls revealed were not just cries for prayer, they were testimonies carved in suffering. When it came to marriage, vows broken, families abandoned, or love discarded, their grief was unbearable. Fina never needed to name names. The silence in her pages thundered louder than any sermon. She wrote with urgency, not judgment, because she understood that souls were suffering and time was running short. The cries were unlike any other, deeper, heavier. These were not the shouts of those who had rejected God, but the laments of those who had once known love and shattered it. She described waves of sorrow pouring from those who believed their divorce was only a decision ink on paper, accepted by culture. Yet from eternity, it was experienced as the tearing apart of something sacred, something eternal. One soul was revealed to her, shrouded not in flames of hate, but in the cold darkness of abandonment. He had walked away from his wife and children long ago, believing they would simply move on. But the wound lingered. It stretched across time, echoing even beyond the grave. These souls were not condemned to hell, they longed for purification. Their torment was not God's vengeance but truth itself, a truth they had ignored in life, now seen with piercing clarity. For marriage was never man's invention. It was not a fragile contract of society. It was heaven's design, etched into creation before sin stained the world. When God fashioned man and woman, He gave not only life, but communion, a bond that reflects eternity. The union of husband and wife was meant to echo Christ and His church, a love that bleeds, forgives, and endures, even beyond betrayal. So, when that bond is torn, it is not only hearts that break, something holy is distorted. Saint Fina was shown this distortion not through books of theology, but through the raw agony of souls who bore its weight. They were not condemned, only delayed. Their journey was held back not because God stopped loving them, but because their love had ceased to reflect His. In heaven's eyes, marriage is never just a stage of life. It is a covenant, a sacred seal that time cannot erase. On earth, divorce is often seen as closure, an ending neatly signed on paper. But in eternity, it lingers as unfinished pain, a wound that waits for healing. What the suffering souls revealed to Street Fina was not God's condemnation, but the raw weight of consequence. They did not cry because they were hated. They cried because they had once held something holy in their hands, and then let it slip away. One soul, shown to Fina in a vision, trembled not from the fire of punishment, but from memory itself, the memory of a slammed door, the memory of walking away while a faithful spouse prayed for him to return. He thought it was small, something life would cover over, something forgiveness would eventually erase. But forgiveness, though offered, could not be received. His heart, hardened by years of excuses and self-justification, no longer opened the same way. And in purgatory, truth cut deeper than any flame. Divorce, when not sought in righteousness or in the name of protection, leaves behind a wound more lasting than we imagine. It is not buried with the body. It lingers. It waits. And in purgatory, those wounds speak louder than any sermon. Yet even there, God does not abandon. In their sorrow, the souls longed for one thing above all, that others would not make the same mistake. Not all who suffered were guilty of betrayal. Some were victims, spouses left behind, carrying the weight of promises they did not break. Fina wrote of a soul who had been abandoned, a faithful spouse, raising children alone, clinging to vows, even when those vows had been discarded. They bore the cross without choice, yet still their heart needed healing. Because purgatory is not only for the guilty, it is also for the broken, the wounded, the ones whose scars must be healed before they can stand in the light of perfect love. Their purification was not punishment, it was restoration. Even the innocent, before entering heaven, must be made whole again. To every heart that has been betrayed, shamed, or left behind, God sees you. He knows. Your pain does not disappear into silence. It is carried into eternity, and heaven takes notice. Street Fina never speculated. She did not imagine. She wrote what she saw. Page after page in her diary tells of souls who reached out from purgatory, not in rage, but in sorrow. Regret clung to them like smoke. One soul wept, not from fear of hell, but from the ache of having wounded love itself. Not through violence, not through hatred, but through small, selfish choices repeated again and again. They thought they had time to fix it, to confess, to explain it away. But in purgatory, truth could no longer be softened, and the weight of that broken vow echoed with divine sadness. Fina wrote with mercy, never judgment. Yet her words carried urgency, because she saw how long these souls would wait, how deep their wounds ran, and how desperately they depended on the prayers of the living. These were not simply stories, they were warnings wrapped in sorrow messages meant for us. And it is crucial to understand, the suffering souls never claimed that marriage must be endured at any cost. The Church, too, has never taught this. What Street Fina witnessed was not meant to shame those who fled true danger, but to awaken those who abandon love without cause. There is a difference. The Church has always been clear. No one is bound to remain where life, dignity, or the safety of children is in grave danger. Canon law affirms this. To separate for protection is not a sin. It is sorrowful, yes, but it is not sin. The greatest wound to the soul, Street Fina discovered, was not always the separation itself, but what came after. When the loneliness of divorce became a reason to rush into another union, without healing, without discernment, without the Church. These were the souls who suffered most, not because they had left, but because they tried to fill the emptiness too quickly. They forgot that the first vow still echoed in heaven. They told themselves God would understand, yet never asked if He permitted. And yes, God understands. He knows our pain, but His call is always the same, back to truth, because only truth has the power to set us free. Some of the souls Fina saw had remarried, not maliciously, but without seeking annulment, without asking the Church if the first bond was still binding. On earth, it looked like starting over, like healing. In eternity, it was a second promise, layered over one that was never dissolved. Their sorrow was not the torment of hatred, but the sting of clarity. They realized too late that what they had called freedom had only delayed peace. They hadn't chosen divorce in their hearts, but they had lived its effects every day. Fina described the grief of these souls as heavy, confused, yet strangely tender. They carried no rage, only regret for what they had never asked, never prayed over, never surrendered. And then came the cries that pierced deepest, not from the spouses, but from the children. Souls in purgatory revealed this pain with trembling voices. The wounds passed on to sons and daughters. A father who walked away, a mother who shut her heart, children raised in silence, forced to grow up fast, carrying questions they never dared to speak aloud. Was it my fault? Am I still lovable? Can love ever last? On earth, those children smiled, got good grades, looked fine. But the soul remembers. It remembers the home that never stayed, the embrace that never returned, the faith tangled in pain. Faustina didn't write statistics, she wrote about wounds invisible to the world yet carved into eternity. From purgatory, some parents now saw with piercing clarity what their choices had cost not just themselves, but the innocence of their children. Their sorrow turned into pleas. Protect your children. Fight for their peace. And if the damage has already been done, pray for their healing. Because God can restore even what we have broken. The suffering souls never thundered threats. They spoke in warnings, gentle, aching, urgent. Mercy, they reminded Faustina, reaches even the deepest cracks in the heart. But mercy is not a magic trick. It requires truth. It requires repentance. It requires returning. Many who suffered most were not the ones who had committed the gravest sins, but the ones who waited too long to face them. They comforted themselves with whispers like, "God knows my heart." Yes, but did you ever give him your heart back? They assumed forgiveness, but never asked for it. They stood at heaven's gates, unable to enter not because God locked them out, but because they had never let him in. Divorce, when repented with sincerity, can be healed. Even the deepest mistakes can be washed in mercy. But never if we deny them, never if we pretend it was fine when it was not. The voices from purgatory echo with urgency. Do not wait, do not silence your conscience, do not mistake moving on for healing when heaven is still calling you home. Mercy is waiting, always waiting, but so is justice. The choice is never tomorrow, it is now. And yet, not every story ends in sorrow. Some of the souls that appeared to Street Faustina spoke not only of pain but of redemption. They found peace, not by erasing the past, but by surrendering it, by admitting the truth, repenting, and lifting up prayers for those they had once wounded. And in that humility, they began to rise, step by step, toward the light. Because God does not erase our scars, He sanctifies them. He transforms even failure, even divorce, even betrayal, into an altar where His mercy meets our brokenness. Wounds that once felt like the end become places where grace enters. If you have made mistakes, if you have been abandoned, if regret weighs heavy on your heart, you are not alone. Heaven has not forgotten you. Mercy still waits with arms wide open. The souls in purgatory do not only weep, they intercede. They plead for you, for your marriage, for your children, for your return to the love you were created for. Their voices are not chains of shame, but invitations to grace. So let their cry become your prayer. Jesus, heal all broken families. Write it below not just as a comment, but as a whisper lifted to heaven. You may never know if your prayer is the one that helps another soul rise, or even your own. Before you leave, if this message stirred something within you, share it. Someone you know may be waiting for hope. And if you want to walk with us in these journeys of faith, consider subscribing. We'd love to pray with you, wherever you are, wherever you're watching from. Because in the end, what matters is not the wound, but what God can make of it. And His mercy is always stronger than our brokenness.